We had to get all ready like rock stars here with all of our audio equipment. Sorry for the minute wait here. But I'd like to welcome you all to the Science Exploration Series. So this is our first Football Saturday lecture of the year. And we're excited about our lineup of lectures this year. So we have everything from neuroscience and behavior, which we have today. And we even have beer making, so it is chemistry after all. So you won't want to miss like beer making one. And ecology, we have 6 different lectures, so be sure to check before games to see which ones you'd like to go to. So our series of events celebrates what the University of Notre Dame has to offer in the classroom and what our researchers do best in their laboratories. So whether this is your first time attending a Saturday science lecture or your 20th, we're excited to have you here before today's game. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Nancy Michael, the Reverend A. Zahm, C.S.C. Associate Teaching Professor of Neuroscience and Behavior. Okay, long one. She is also the Director of Undergraduate Studies for Neuroscience and Behavior. And next, we have Velshonna Luckey. She's Director of Engagement for Self-Healing Communities of Greater Michiana. Professor Michael earned her bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences from Western Michigan University and her doctoral degree in neuroscience from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Ms. Luckey earned her bachelor's degree in business administration from Central Michigan University and her master's degree in management from Indiana Wesleyan, along with a certificate in nonprofit executive leadership from Notre Dame. In partnership with multiple community organizations, Professor Michael, who's earned accolades, many accolades, she is highly decorated, including the Society for Neuroscience Next Generation Award, multiple teaching and advising awards, and she was also part of the Michiana 40 Under 40 class. She works to develop and implement something called NEAR, which is Neuroscience, Epigenetics, Adverse Childhood Experiences, Resilience, Science Approaches that aim to mitigate the impact of toxic stress on people and communities by contributing to general community capacity. Her research uses a community-based change theory model to work with community organizations in developing population-specific NEAR-based strategies to support organizational and community efforts in becoming trauma-informed. Ms. Luckey worked at the Robinson Community Learning Center, which is the University of Notre Dame's community center, for many years. In 2011, she received the Presidential Values Award from the university, an award that recognizes employees whose performance reflect the university's core values of integrity, accountability, teamwork, leadership in mission, and leadership in excellence. In 2014, she received the Indiana Torchbearer Award from the Indiana Commission for Women. In her role with self-healing communities, Ms. Luckey said she believes that having thoughtful consideration for the needs of all stakeholders while honoring their competing efforts or desires can help everyone succeed and thrive. These are also important factors for creating sustainable change. She teaches a 1-credit NEAR science workshop in collaboration with Professor Michael. Thank you, Nancy and Velshonna, for speaking to us today. And thank you all for supporting science at Notre Dame.
How's it going? Yeah. I mean, it's a football Saturday, so let's try that. How's it going? Okay, there we go. All right. My name is Nancy Michael. I'm going to see if my little clicker thing here works. No. Great. Okay. Welcome. All right. So I'm the director of undergraduate studies. We're gonna hopefully get some stuff going. Get to do some learning before a football game. All right. As long as this is advancing. Okay. Here we go. So kind of the background. We don't really think. How many people think about how their brain works? Handful of people, maybe. How many people think about all of the things that your body does for you all of the time without even thinking about it? Yeah, no, sometimes, right? So oftentimes, so one of the biggest ideas to hopefully take home with you today is that the brain is a situated organ. Not situated, yes, it is situated inside of your skull, but your brain is situated in this broader context, right? So all of the learning that you've ever done kind of helps you understand that, oh my gosh, we're in a lecture hall right now, right? So your brain changes function to say, like, put the sit still and listen mode on, right? Which is going to be really different than how you are in, I don't know, at 3:30. Right? Totally different context. So the brain is always situated in this broader context outside of ourselves, right? It's these exchanges with the environment, right, that kind of accumulate over the course of lifetime that really helps us learn and adapt to situations that we find ourselves in now, right? And so this is a really good thing because it allows us to not have to learn everything from scratch every single day. So early experiences become tremendously important when we think about this. The stuff that we're able to do now, right, is built on kind of the stuff that we've repeated over time. This is a crazy picture of a lot of black squiggles. They're not spiders, don't worry. All right, so anybody know, where's your brain live? Pop quiz. In your skull, yeah? Anybody know the primary cell types? There's 2 primary cell types of the brain. Anybody know what they are? I don't know if you're a major, you're not allowed to answer. What's that? Amazing! Yeah, all right. If I have like candy, I'd toss it to you. Sorry, there we go. I'll grab a sandwich from outside. All right, so neurons and glial cells. There's about 86 billion neurons and about 86 billion glial cells that make up your brain, right? So our behaviors emerge not because all these cells are just kind of thrown into a bucket, but because they have a very particular organization. And the particular organization, right? Everybody that looks reproducibly a brain, yeah? That particular organization produces the typical structure of a human brain. Okay? That's largely reproducible from human to human. What's really unique and really dependent upon early experiences is the specific, what I like to call microarchitecture of those neurons and glial cells. Right, so has anybody ever seen a seed, like to go plant something? All right, has anybody ever seen like a sapling? All right, and then like a big tree, yeah? So a very similar thing is happening here. I am going to try to grab this. Hopefully it'll point for me. Nope, just kidding, it's taking too long. All right, very similar thing is happening here. At the time of birth, right, a baby can't do much. At the time of birth, the neurons in baby's brain are like little seedling neurons. And through the exchanges with the environment, so baby cries, the expectation of baby is that somebody comes. Through the exchanges that baby has with the environment over time, those little seedling neurons grow into like these sapling neurons, right? And then they grow into these giant oak tree neurons. And the ways in which, right? So it's not so much, right? We should all have we're neurotypical in our development, right? It's not so much that there's going to be measurable differences from brain to brain, right? But it's in this microarchitecture stuff. How our early environments influence which branches grow, which ones get pruned away. When a big storm comes through, what are we practicing? How do we feel? And how do those experiences live with us and stick with us through the architecture of our brain? I get goosebumps. Who else is excited? This is cool stuff, yeah? All right, here we go. I get my steps in, too, to come back and click this button. All right, so we talk about, then, the nervous system. So we showed a picture of a brain. In that previous slide, there were 3 different panels. So that's the branching and the development of neurons over the first 2 years of life in human cortex. It's astounding, right? So if you think about a baby and what a baby is able to do at the time that it's born, right? Until what can a baby do? A toddler, I guess, do at the time that they're 2. So much more, right? They're running around, they're talking, and that emerges, right? So our behaviors, who we are, what we're capable of doing, emerges out of this change in this microarchitecture that informs then our entire nervous system development. Okay? So our nervous system is our brain, central nervous system, brain, spinal cord. Then we got this peripheral nervous system stuff that goes out into the, I don't know, Goes out into our periphery. Goes out from the spine into like your gut. The peripheral nervous system is what helps me walk. My central nervous system is the thing that's thinking about, seeing, interpreting, understanding, creating perception. My central nervous system sends out a command so that my peripheral nervous system can make me walk. Okay? How many people have ever felt hungry? How many people, so that's a peripheral signal, right? How many people have ever felt nervous? Okay, that's weird, right? Because that's something that happens in your brain, but where do you feel it?
In your gut.
In your gut, absolutely. Thank you. High five, audience participation, I love it. All right, in your gut, absolutely. You feel it in your gut. You can feel it. Who gets sweaty palms, right? I was talking to my daughter earlier. Sometimes I get nervous and it feels like my throat might clench off, right? Sometimes I feel sick to my stomach. Right? So it's weird, right? So that would suggest that the nervous system and the periphery, do they work in isolation from one another? Or do you think they got to communicate in some way? They would have to communicate in some way. Because otherwise, if I'm just sending commands out to my body, how am I going to get information back in to be like, oh, stop walking straight. You got to go up that aisle. Stop walking straight. Right? There's got to be this constant exchange. If I were hungry and there was no communication with my central nervous system, I could never change my motor pattern to go get food. Yeah? All right, so we have our nervous system then, the central and peripheral, that informs and communicates with something called an endocrine system. And it's our endocrine system that helps us recognize, oh gosh, well, we don't have enough blood sugar. We don't have enough glucose running around. I'm going to send some signals from my blood through the endocrine system that's going to activate some stuff in my peripheral nervous system that gets back into the brain. So these things are in constant communication all of the time. Thank you, friend. Oh, except, there you go. Yeah, you can just use that one too. Okay. All right, awesome. So this is kind of how we often break it down, right? We have this nervous system. And how many people have ever heard, I don't even know. We won't go there right now. We'll parking lot that one for a little bit. Okay, so the nervous system. So the nervous system itself, brain, spinal cord, peripheral stuff, is broken down then. The way that we talk about it is that there's this central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, and a peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system really has a tremendous amount of responsibility in keeping the cells of your body healthy. That's a weird thing to say, isn't it? The cells of your body healthy. Because it's ultimately, we use this phrase, emerges, right? Like our personhood emerges, our personalities emerge from, right, a lot of this microarchitecture stuff. Our health emerges from how healthy our individual cells are and how healthy they are in communication and coordination with each other, and then how healthy they are and how balanced that communication and coordination is across systems. So the peripheral nervous system has a tremendous job to do. What's it like to feel nervous? What's it? Your heart rate goes up? Ooh, sorry. Heart rate goes up? Absolutely. All right, so that's a peripheral cue. What's it like to feel? How do you know when you're relaxed? How do you know when you feel safe? What changes? So if it's nervous, is like heart rate up, palms sweaty, squidgy in your stomach. What's relaxed feel like?
It's like a release of tension.
Yeah, right? That like, right? I have to remind me, when I do talks like this, I have to remind myself, just take a deep breath. Because I get really excited, and then I start talking really fast, right? And I'm like, okay, right? So that's an example of a balance then between the peripheral nervous system kind of breaks up. We've got this autonomic nervous system that does this balance between fight or flight. People heard about that one? Okay, and then so that would be like, that's when I'm nervous. That's when I'm like ready to go, man. My sympathetic nervous system is armed and it's going, right? There's another kind of, we always like to make catchy phrases because it makes it easier. Rest and digest. Know that one? Okay, I get some nods back there, but rest and digest. Maybe you could just imagine, right? Like, that's when you're like, But because everything is in communication all of the time, this one is a little bit misleading because it's like here we have the central nervous system and we have the brain and the spinal cord, and then we have the peripheral nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system does all of this stuff. But in fact, for our central nervous system to be able to use any of the information from our body, there's this kind of cross communication all of the time, right? That there's really not a whole lot. While systems, from a systems perspective, you can continue to parse out and define in this very singular direction. But to be able to be an integrated whole as a human, for your whole function to work together, there's got to be feedback from the periphery back into the central nervous system. And so a lot of this happens both through then, not only the central and peripheral nervous system, but also this endocrine system provides really, really powerful information about, do I need to be ready to go, right? Am I fight or flight right now? Am I sympathetically activated? Or am I safe enough so that the cells of my body can step back into this homeostatic, healthy range to do this rest and digest, to wonder, to create, to reflect, to grow, right? All right. So it kind of brings us to why we're here. So that's some background, right? That's kind of the foundational. You have my first year of graduate school in approximately 11 minutes. How do you feel? Hey! All right. So in graduate school, I was wondering, like, I learned so many things in graduate school about, like, how the brain is reorganized, how the brain is a situated organ during adolescence. How many people were like, wow, this is terrible? How many people think back at middle school and like, man, I want to do that again every single year? Probably not a single person ever would ever say that, right? Those are really, really hard times because it turns out your brain is getting actively reorganized, right? So things are surprising because, like, there's no prediction. There's no accurate prediction. So I was learning all this stuff in graduate school, and I was like, man, why doesn't everybody know this? Like, why isn't this the platform with which we, like, be friends and take care of ourselves and take care of our kiddos and take care of each other, right? And so the framework for this is really about, like, how do we mobilize some of that evidence?
Childhood is a critical period of life. Those growing brains are working hard to make sense of each new moment and store things away for later. When a child experiences adversity, that critical development can be compromised in the moment and throughout their lives. Fortunately, just as adverse experiences can harm, positive experiences can heal and change the course of a child's life. Even one caring adult can help to create a safe and predictable environment, help a child to build coping skills, and foster resiliency. When adults are present in the moment, when we listen without judgment, and when we encourage natural curiosity, we can strengthen their sense of safety and well-being. Positive childhood experiences extend beyond the home too. Teachers, coaches, and friends who care are powerful protective forces. And don't underestimate the power of community and culture. Traditions, teams, and clubs can help build a healthy sense of self that lasts into a thriving adulthood. It's never too late to care for a child and help put them on the path to a healthy future.
Why is this going back? I'm not too sure why the formatting looks different on our PowerPoint now that we've watched a video, but we'll get there. So what did you guys hear in that? I'm going to take like 30 seconds, talk to somebody next to you. What did that video make you feel? What did you hear that might have been related to any of this nervous system development stuff? It's okay, you can talk to the people next. I'm giving you permission. Go, talk. But I came to a lecture. All right, what do we got? All right.
Without caring their community in your early years, you're basically sort of screwed.
Sort of screwed.
I'll be glad.
Yeah, right? So this kind of puts us back in the context of the brain is not only a situated organ, but the human nervous system is actually really expectant of certain experiences along this longer course of development, right? So we said, what can a baby do? Nothing, right? And in the absence of care, what's going to happen to baby? Baby's going to die, right? There's no negotiating that, right? The human nervous system is born expectant of care, and very particular, right? And like, so that's the consistency and the responsiveness and the tenderness with which, right? Little baby brain starts as this little seedling neuron, grows into sapling neurons, grows into these big old oak tree neurons, based on a lot of these environmental pressures, these exchanges between the nervous system and the environment helps develop this microarchitecture, okay? So when we deprive, right, so the nervous system has an expectation. And so one of the ways that I started to think about it, the more and more that I learned, is that it's really like, yeah, you can get caught, right? If there's nobody there to look out for you, man, that's hard, yeah? The brain is also remarkably adaptive as well. So often, the brain's number one job is always survival. And the brain's going to figure it out, right? The distance between the expectation and the experience can kind of represent the vulnerability in a system, right? And as that system ages then, the strategies for survival that are developed in that teeny tiny emerging microarchitecture can either then be in line with, in stream with kind of what the behavioral and cultural expectations are, or those behaviors that emerged as the strategies for surviving in this really, really difficult place can get to become in friction with what those cultural forces can be. Go ahead. All right. So really, really briefly, right? So the work that we do is built, the work that we do is built on many, many decades of experience. These guys, it was the original ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, 17,000 participants from the Kaiser Permanente healthcare system. If something happened to you, they had 10 questions. So this happened to you before the age of 18. And what they found, because they couldn't explain a lot of these health conditions, there was no genetic basis for it, they were like, okay, so what's going on? So what they found was that the greater the stress dose earlier in development, the more likely an individual is to end up with some health problems later on in life. Okay, go ahead. All right. So if you take a second to look at this, some of these things we can maybe make sense of, right? So there's this oil, so there's the pie that represents the whole. There's this oil slicky stuff in the middle. And this is called a population attributable risk. It's a public health measure that indicates or suggests that if we did away with, right, if we could get rid of the stress associated with early childhood adversity, we could eliminate 56% of anxiety. What? We could eliminate 69% of serious or persistent mental illness. We could eliminate 67% of suicide, 78% of IV drug use, right? The list goes on and on. We can often make sense of these ones because they're like, oh yeah, when I'm stressed, right? I can see how that would be. But have you ever thought about cardiovascular disease? What? Cancer, diabetes, asthma? Also have a pretty significant attributable risk associated to so much pressure on the system when that system is developing. So when people learn about this, okay, so it's often like, okay, yeah, we get it. What do we do? I want to do something. And so that's where our work together comes in, right? So self-healing communities model. This is a model of community capacity building rooted in the evidence of neuroscience, developmental human physiology, understanding how, right, asking somebody to separate nature versus nurture is like asking somebody to separate the eggs and milk from a cake that's already been baked. We just can't do it. So how do we all develop a deeper understanding of what nervous systems really need? Because then it's not necessarily solely up to an educational system, solely up to whatever, right? That we all get a chance to take a step in. Self-healing communities model is based on over 20 years of data in Washington State. It's a general community capacity building model.
And so our mission, this is where they brought me in. I am the non-scientist in this wonderful work. So our mission is to nurture personal and community well-being through the neuroscience of human resilience and the celebration of our collective strengths. I fell in love with the brain before I met Dr. Michael. And it was because my mother had a disease called cerebellum ataxia. It is a rare disease. My grandmother had it, she has had it, and now 2 of my sisters are navigating it now. So long before I knew anything about all of this wonderful stuff that Dr. Michael has shared, I knew the impact of having something go wrong with the brain. Okay, so again, the cerebellum is shrinking. At the time that my mother had it, we only thought about it just helps us with walking. We've learned a lot more about what happens when the cerebellum isn't functioning properly. And with theirs, the spinal cord is also shrinking. And so this work is primarily funded by Beacon Community Impact, which gives grants throughout our community, and it helps us be able to connect with a number of nonprofits. So you'll be learning a little bit more about our resources, but again, the main thing is to put this information, some of what you heard today, into the hands of everyday citizens to help with all of those things that Dr. Michael just mentioned. So the original Self-Healing Communities model, they have these gears, right? So she mentioned about the ACEs research. We know that people who have gone through adverse experiences when they were younger, there's all these other things that could have an impact because of those adverse experiences. In our case, we are focused on helping the helpers. So how many of you all know nurses? How many of you all know teachers? How many of you all know social workers? Do they have a little bit of stress going on? And oh, they proud. You in that list somewhere. Do you know about the stress that they carry? So our intention is to focus on helping the helpers. We go into the school systems, talk with the social workers, the teachers. We had a presentation just this past week with Real Services to let people understand the benefit of having a community supporting you is so powerful. When you think about, I see you, but I don't know your story. Those pictures that she showed about the nervous system, how many of us walk up to another individual and you think about all that's going on inside of them, that they got a story, they had some experiences? Not many, right? But what if we did? What if we showed up in a way with this awareness and thoughtfulness? How beautiful. I am one of them people, they told you all about my title and awards, but when I communicate and share about who I am and what I do, I just say, I'm a lover of love. I love humans. I genuinely care about the well-being of our species, of one another. So this science and intentionally, again, helping the helpers really helps to build and dream about the self-healing communities. We could not do this work. Listen, I'm being recorded. I won't say what I normally say, but I'm a serious person. I take care of business. I make things happen, right? But here's the thing. We could have never had the success that we've had if not for the partnership with Dr. Michael and her students. So this video goes into showing you how Notre Dame students come alongside so that we can have this beautiful success in our community.
I'm Nancy Michael, Director of Undergraduate Studies for the Neuroscience and Behavior major in the College of Science at the University of Notre Dame. It's a mouthful, I know. In the classroom, we take the students on a developmental journey. The nervous system doesn't start fully developed. It actually starts really, really immature. If you think about what an infant can do and what a grown-up can do, all of that skill development and behavioral development is driven by a developing and maturing nervous system. So the really crazy thing is that the developing nervous system actually has expectations of the environment, of engagement and care and exposure to multi-sensory experiences. If we want grown-ups to be a certain way, how do we have to intentionally engage with infants, toddlers, children, teenagers, and grown-ups to build the nervous system architecture that underlies the production of those skills later in life? One of the things that I love about being at Notre Dame is that you're invited to ask questions of spirituality and moral value and purpose. It's a guiding point of discussion all throughout the semester, because if we're repeatedly spending our time doing nothing but studying and test taking and all of the things that check the box to build our resume, how are we encountering the people in our lives, and how are we showing our value for solidarity or our value for common good? Most humans exacerbated by a global pandemic are coming to the table with some kind of trauma. There's so much of a cultural value system that's like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, or it happens to everybody, right? So, and we continue to perpetuate harm transgenerationally. This has motivated the development of a community coalition called Self-Healing Communities, an evidence-based community capacity building model based off 20 years of data out of Washington State. So the idea behind self-healing is that it's not me needing services from somewhere else, that I get a choice in my own healing as well. If I am full of self-hatred, I will never be able to heal, right? But if I can understand that my brain is molded through interaction with my environment and it's adaptive in these early situations, I might be able to give myself some grace and find motivation and hope in unexpected places that I was not able to before. There's this tagline in trauma-informed care: it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what's happened to you, which is really appropriate in capturing this moment of choice where we can react to like, ugh, what's wrong with that person, right? Or we can be like, wow, they seem really angry. I wonder if they're okay. Because those two different thought processes have the opportunity to lead to really different strategies of engagement, conflict, or withdrawal. How do I want my students to be different after taking this course? I want them to have moments, and many of them throughout their lifetimes, where they might run into somebody and have a reaction and then pause and be like, you know what? I had this class this one time. Maybe what's happening here isn't really what I think. Maybe I need to be the one to take a minute and ask a different question instead of just kind of reacting to and escalating. And I think so many opportunities for connection and communication are prevented and usurped before they even have a chance to grow, because we just react so quickly, or we judge. And right, there are biases in the neural architecture that make that a very reasonable thing to do. But I think understanding the mechanism and the developmental principles that underlie mature brain function allows us to have a choice in those moments. We have the opportunity to better the condition of humans in an active and engaged way. And so that's really what I hope to be able to do with my students, to help them to understand that they're more than what they know. That what they know is important, but it's how they use what they know to improve the world around us. I think my greatest hope is that they get to have much more of a choice about how they see the world and how they engage with the people around them.
And I've seen this video so many times, and I always tear up. I've been working with Notre Dame students for over 22 years, but this particular work is so amazing because a lot of those students that you saw, they're in medical school, and that they're always taking what they've learned here into wherever they go. I say all the time, I'm thinking about you 10 years from now. The companies that you're running, the clinics that you're working in, the societies that you are a leader in. And it's just been a phenomenal opportunity. We have a team of 5 right now, along with a community member, And again, like I said, we could not do this work if it wasn't for our internship program. So we have one of our amazing interns who's going to talk you through one of the big pieces of my responsibility is the advancement of resources that we actually put out into the community. How many of you all have heard of science translation? Yeah, so you take all of this big brain stuff and you make it available for children, for teenagers, for seniors. So that intentionality is a big part of our work, because how do we get to the point of building resilient communities if people can't digest it, understand it, and apply it to their life? I tell my staff, my team all the time, we are not just teaching this work. We must embody it. We have to live it. So she's going to come and share a little bit about that. Thank you, Karina Duffy.
Hello? Okay, great. Everyone can hear me?
Yeah, the microphone too.
Sorry? Oh, I did turn her on. Is it working? Okay.
Not yet, not yet.
On and on. Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, fine? We're good? Okay, we're chill. Hi, I'm Karina. I just graduated from Notre Dame in May. I studied neuroscience and theology, and I've been working with self-learning communities since my sophomore year, which I'll talk a little bit about. But before I came to Notre Dame, I fell in love with the brain in high school. My grandfather had Alzheimer's, and I realized how important the brain is for just living and for storing memory and thought, and so just got really fascinated. So I knew coming to Notre Dame that I knew I wanted to study neuroscience. But then in the first year, I started taking classes with the Center for Social Concerns and really learning about the need for social justice and systemic change. And so going into sophomore year, I was like, how do you reconcile this love for neuroscience that you have, Karina, but also this love and this need for systemic change? And so sophomore year was pandemic year, and so scheduling was a little bit weird, and we had this huge long winter session course, so we had 10 weeks off, and Velshonna and Dr. Michael were teaching this near key science workshop. So this workshop that talked about how neuroscience, epigenetics, ACEs, resilience, and protective factors really can start to build a self-healing community. I had no clue what any of these words meant when I saw the class. I'm like, this seems like the answer to my question of how to use neuroscience to create change. So I took the class, and it blew my mind. I had no clue what ACEs were. I didn't know developmental neuroscience really that much, but I just fell in love. And my team, one of the ideas that we came up with was creating this glossary of terms. So a lot of the time we talk about trauma, or we talk about allostatic overload, and how do we know that we're talking about the same things when we say this word trauma, and how do we know if it's rooted in science? And so from that, Dr. Michael asked if I wanted to be an intern in the spring and develop this manual called the Self-Healing Communities Manual to really build out this glossary of terms. I had no clue what I was signing up for. Everything was so mysterious, but every week during the spring, I would meet Dr. Michael, I would skate over on my little skateboard, and we would meet outside, because it was pandemic times and we had to social distance, and we met every single week. And what was so beautiful about that time is to really lean into the precision of language and to really learn how it is to make this stuff that I was learning in my classes easy to digest for the greater community. And so that was really a gift. And so from that, this second trauma-informed manual came out, which Self-Healing Communities has used to train different community organizations in becoming trauma-informed. Next, please. And so also, there's been also amazing interns who have developed such incredible resources. So during the spring also, No Snowing for the Brain, Alex, Rebecca, and Kate were also interns, and they developed this children's book with 2 really fun characters and helps teach elementary school kids about the brain, but also their parents. Asia and the team created brain health for primary caregivers, so teaching parents how to care for their brains and their little ones. And then in the spring, Velshonna asked me, Velshonna is the idea lady. She has these dreams and she has these ideas, and I get some crazy emails from her. And one of them was, can you please develop a handout on brain care, self-care? That's it. That's all she said. I'm like, man, what? So I had to think about what I learned from Dr. Michael, think about what I was learning in my classes, and think about, okay, what are the core neurobiological needs in order for us to really thrive and flourish? And so we distilled it down into these 6 different brain care tips, which came out to be this resource, and then developed into a book, which Dr. Michael and I worked on, and then developed into conversation playing cards, and now it's developing into affirmation cards. So there's a whole suite around brain care. And so it's been such a gift to be able to work with different interns, work on such a beautiful team in order to really make neuroscience accessible.
And they have one.
Yes, and also you will see that handout in front of you. Hopefully everyone has a little handout. And so last summer I was working with South Lake Communities full-time as an intern, and we did a lot of research around grief because especially coming out of the pandemic, everyone's grieving some sort of loss, either the loss of a life, the loss of a job, the loss of a future we thought we had. And we're storing that in our bodies, like Dr. Michael was saying earlier. All of our experiences are manifest in our nervous systems. And so we don't know what's going on, but we do. Neuroscience knows what's happening in the brain and the body and how grief really affects us, but the general public doesn't know that. We might know that in our classes, we might know that in scholarly articles, and so team and I worked on developing this near-P science of grief and loss. And so this summer, a new intern team has taken it on and further developed the research. And we spent a lot of time researching and ideating, and so hopefully within this next year, we'll have another suite of resources based off of this work on grief. And just this summer, we have this beautiful partnership with the ACEs Indiana Coalition, which is a statewide coalition that trains trainers on the effects of adverse childhood experiences. So those trainers go in their communities and they train different people in their communities. And so it's a huge partnership, and they asked us to develop these activity books for children centered around brain care. And so we made it into 7 different booklets, one for each of the tips and one introduction. And it was so much fun just to be with this brilliant team of interns that not only, it was a challenge, because it's like, how do I take what I'm learning in neuroscience and make it accessible to people, adults, but then also have to make it accessible to little kiddos? But we had so much fun, and what's been so beautiful about South Lake Communities is that we have the freedom to innovate, the freedom to just bring all of our creative ideas to the table, and so to see all of the different interns and the different ideas that they had and how we poured into this. And so one of these ideas came to be the Brady Bunch. So each booklet has its own character, and we were very intentional about what characters were represented, the names chosen. But one of the interns was like, we need to have like a catchy name, like the Neuron Squad or the Brain Group. And so we're all like looking up different synonyms, and it came up Bunch. We're like, oh my gosh, guys, the Brady Bunch. And an intern was like, I'm on it. And he created this image to replicate the original Brady Bunch. And so it's just really, really cool. And so for me, self-healing communities has been the biggest gift ever, because at Notre Dame, we talk about a commitment to the common good. We talk about using our education in order to build a just and flourishing and peace and abundant society. And it's like, okay, how do you do that? How do I use my education to do that? And self-healing communities has really been the answer to that for me, because it's been such a privilege to learn about this rich understanding of the nervous system. But like, that shouldn't just stay with me, and it shouldn't just stay with me and my peers, and we're talking about the nervous system in order to study for an exam. Like, this is information that everyone should have, and this, once people understand how to care for themselves, what they need, and then what someone else needs, and how it is that an act of kindness or an act of grace can really help to heal a person and really help to heal a society, that's when everything can change. And so I'm just so grateful to be a part of this work, to have this been the foundation of my college experience. I mean, 3 out of my 4 years was spent with self-healing communities, and it contextualized all of my STEM classes. Like genetics, I was looking at through a lens of self-healing communities. Cellular biology, like everything was looked at through this lens of, okay, that makes sense, and that's going to change how I treat this person, or oh, that makes sense why they're reacting in that way. Maybe that's because it's stored in this part of the brain and whatnot. And so it's completely changed the way I engage with people in front of me. It's completely engaged with my education, and it's gonna completely change the way I know my life is gonna be lived. And it's also beautiful to see, like Velshonna was saying, just the interns' commitment to this work even after graduating. 2 of my closest intern friends from here, Kate and Asia, they're both in med school right now, and like we still keep in contact, and they're so committed to addressing ACEs in their work, in the way that they treat their patients. It like gives me the chills, and so it's been a gift, and I'm so grateful to be here. So that's it.
Hey, Karina, before you go too far, are you here for the game? How are you?
I am here for the game.
Well, you mentioned that you graduated in the spring.
Yes, I did. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm here for the year. Sorry, yeah, I guess I didn't put that in the intro. I'm working full-time as a self-healing communities coordinator with the As my shirt says, I love South Bend. I'm originally from California, Southern California, and that is home, but this is also my home, and so I'm so happy to be here for the year working with self-healing communities.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. So, I mean, so that's what we do, right? All of this work, all of this effort, right? The first little bit of today, our time together, was kind of like the brain. What are the basics of the brain, right? What does every single nervous system, human nervous system, expect from the world around us, right? There will always be more questions to answer scientifically, right? We can talk about single polymorphism mutations, or we can talk about splice variant. We can throw around all of these words. In a world of personalized medicine, absolutely, 1 million more questions that will always be able to be asked scientifically. But we understand, we have decades of evidence that establishes, right? His name escapes me, former director of National Institutes of Mental Health. Yeah, just wrote a book about our path to healing, right? And his tagline is people, place, and purpose, right? That is the essence of the literature that Self-Healing Communities tries to capture. Every single nervous system embedded in the genetic code develops an expectancy to find safety in people, place, and purpose. We all come from uniquely different backgrounds. We've all had different access and resources and family support, communities, languages, religions, all of these things. There's a tremendous diversity of almost 8 billion people on the planet. Every single one of them has a different, unique microarchitecture. And so the question really becomes, do we wait until science has the ability to answer all of these questions? Or do we know enough to say, like, oh, I mean, when you boil it down to people, place, purpose, that the nervous system is expected to find safety in those spaces, well, then that creates something that we can all do. We can all take part in it. And it does matter. Change is absolutely up to us.
And I just want to stress that the relationships that have been built within this community around this information is really, really powerful. It does take time, but we have people who are walking around with these cards asking questions. Okay, what are you working on this week? What are you thinking about? So we really, again, we want to give this as a gift, but we want you to try every morning thinking about which one am I going to focus on? Which one am I going to share with someone else? And on the second side, this is actually a bonus. We are developing them as little cards that you can put in your wallet. So please also take that with you. Lastly, from me, whenever you see our logo, Self-Healing Communities of Greater Michiana, or that little hand holding the brain, you know that it's been thoroughly researched. We have spent a lot of time. It has to get past Dr. Michael, and then it has to get past me, because it needs to be able to be understood by everyone. So thank you for your time. And our last slide, please, if you can check out our QR code. If you would like to have more information, stay connected with us, please give us your email, and any additional questions you may have about our work, please let us know. And right now, you can ask some questions. We try to work hard to, yes?
So, wow. Talk about being a force for good in the community. I have a bazillion questions, but I'll connect with you. But right off the top of my head is, how do we get a hold of some of the tools that you've already developed? There is such a need out there. There is such a need. And are there plans in place to replicate this in other communities outside of Michiana, and how can we help?
Yes, so one of the big things is that I am one of those big dreamers. Dr. Michael gave me a book a long time ago. If you haven't seen it or read it, What Do You Do with an Idea?
It's a children's book.
It's a children's book, and it's amazing. One of my best friends are here. We met here at Notre Dame 22 years ago, and we just have been dreamers. And so one of the things I always think about is that our focus right now is this community, but I'm a global thinker. And so our relationship with the state coalition has allowed us to distribute it throughout Indiana. We are not fully funded. So I always tease and say, I grew up poor, I know how to do stuff without money. But at some point, we need to be able to continue. We want to be able to print these resources and distribute it in many communities for free. We are right now, they are available on our website to download for free. And we will continue to share information if you sign up for our email to make sure we want it to be easily accessible. And it's something about, you can get it digital, but it's something about having this on your nightstand. I talk about it all the time. I went through a very difficult season in my life, and before I opened my eyes, I reached for my reading glasses and I reached for this card. And I was like, okay, what do I need to work on today? Right? And so, again, it is available, and we do want to intentionally distribute it here locally. We have a lot of partnerships, thanks to Dr. Michael being intentional with building relationships with nonprofits across this region, and we like to always share it and distribute it. And we do workshops, so that's another thing. If you wanted to do some online training in person, we do come in and we do trainings and workshops as well.
I understand that there's a mental health center being developed between Notre Dame and South Bend, and I'm hoping that it's going to affect your program. Can you talk about that?
I hope so too. The one thing that we're doing a really diligent job of in these last few years is building relationship. Oftentimes, sometimes we are so focused on the actual everyday interactions, and sometimes people are just thinking about the development of things. And so over time, I know for me, intentionally, we're trying to make sure we're ready when people want to partner. So if you could be a voice to share about the good work that we're doing, it will be helpful. We haven't directly had those conversations yet, but we do know about it happening. You want to add anything to that?
Anything to that? Yeah, I think we're more grassroots, I think. So a lot of the work, a lot of these partnerships emerge from to kind of coordinated structures or structures that we've developed to support the undergraduates in their work. I think we have a tendency to fly under the radar sometimes. Yeah.
And we're hoping that will shift.
Yeah.
One more thing, I always tell the students, be ready So when we're called upon, we're already ready. And that's what we love. So again, spread the word. Yes.
I wanted to ask, can people volunteer with your organization at all, or how does that work?
Good question. We're actually moving into, so again, I'm one of the people that kind of keeps things rolling. We're moving into a season where we want to have learning cohorts. And those learning cohorts, that even playing field where we're all learning this together, caring for one another, we do need people, one, willing to learn, but also willing to spread the word and support the development of this. So there are ways to volunteer, but the first wing of volunteering is learning. So we bring you in to learn about our culture, our intention. I'm big on organizational culture, how we show up in spaces. And so, yes, definite opportunity. And if you're interested in that, please make sure that you put that in the comment section when you do the QR code. Yes.
This seems so impressive and so important to expand beyond the neuroscience major, and even consider incorporating a class like this. I don't know if they have Moreau seminary or things, for all the freshmen, but it just seems like it would just make better people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think those are active conversations, right? That I know that's an active conversation with Moreau, actually, in terms of, right, how do we encourage both academic excellence, which we do really, really well, but the way, right, so we looked at that 3-panel thing of like saplings, seedling, sapling, big oak tree, right? When so much of the encouragement and construction becomes solely focused on the academics, right, that like, it's really easy to not put focus on the who, right? Like, what kind of person do you want to be? What are the characteristics and qualities of humanness that are important for you to be able to express? Somebody, not me, said something like, we are how we repeatedly spend our time. And that's absolutely true from what, like, the strength of connections that drive our behaviors. So that is an active conversation in campus. I know with the new strategic framework, for better or worse, community engagement is not named anywhere in it. It's alluded to and suggested, but those are the kinds of, so there are conversations about it, but it's still not named as a named priority.
And right now we do have students who want to work with us, the internship program that I support. We just don't have funding for internships. I'm big on whether it's community partners, whether it's students, to really be able to, yes, some of them volunteer, but we do like to be able to pay them for their time so that they can think about this being a part of their job when they become, full-time grown-ups. So I really try to do a lot of professional development. My background is primarily in business. And again, I do executive coaching. And so I bring all of that to supervision because I want them, if they never have a supervisor like me again, that they will be that person. And so, again, we do want to incorporate, we do have a couple other non-neuroscience students who are part of helping us build our podcast. There's a lot of things in the work, but at this time, they do have to volunteer, and those number of hours are a lot smaller. One more. Oh.
I think we have time for one more question.
What's the name of your podcast?
Oh, please email us. It is Self-Healing Communities of Greater Michiana. That is the name of it, but it hasn't been released. I am one of those people that once you start social media and a podcast, I don't want breaks. And so we have some in the queue, but when we roll it out, I want to be able to consistently release it. So hopefully in another month, we will release our first one. A Notre Dame student did our intro and outro music, so that's beautiful. He's an economics student. All right.
Thank you so much for coming.